guys, Damon Comerio with Comerio Corporation here. Hey, wanted to do a quick video to show you like 3 different types of home sites as far as how I would see them. And so let's do this. 3 types of home sites, or some people would call a lot. Okay? So the 3 types that I see that we basically would have is going to be number 1 would be a new home subdivision. Okay. Number 2 would be land. Okay. Number 3 would be an existing subdivision. It's maybe older. Okay. So we have new home subdivision, like raw land, or an existing older subdivision. So let's talk about examples of each. So a new home subdivision here, let's see, would be like Chapel Hill, okay, where we build in. We've got Dayton Creek is another one, Boulder Springs, okay. Those are examples of new home subdivisions where they have on-site agents. There's homes actively being built. We're a builder in those subdivisions. There's other builders in the subdivisions. So the norm is for construction to be happening all the time. They have different phases, and so generally you start with the first phase, you get it built out, the developer puts the streets in, the infrastructure for the second phase, third phase, fourth phase. Some of these have 10, 11 phases that are 600 to 800 home sites over a 10 or 15 year period. So some of these are just large developments that just perpetuate go, 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 and we're constantly building and building. So that would be an example of a new home subdivision. An example of land would be, let's say the home buyer comes to us and they don't want to be in a new home subdivision because the home sites are smaller and you're going to have neighbors, so maybe they find, you know, 5 acres or something, you know, 5 acres, 10 acres, 2 acres, whatever. There's different things that you have to think about when you're building on raw land versus a new home subdivision home site that's been developed. The third would be existing subdivision, existing older subdivision probably. And so an example of that would be if you went to, let's see, like Prairie Village or Mission Hills or Roland Park, something like that, where there is an existing subdivision where their homes are older and somebody is wanting to live down there, but they don't want the home that's on the actual home site currently. So they may buy the home site with the home, bulldoze the home, destroy it, get rid of it, put a brand new house on there. So they've essentially created their own building lot, their own home site from a neighborhood that didn't have one available. Or maybe there's a one-off. We've seen that before, where there's a subdivision that's, you know, 30, 40 years old. There's just a home site that nobody ever bought. An individual probably owns it at this point in time, that they're just sitting on it, and or maybe the house caught fire and they bulldozed it. It just sat there forever. So there's a way to build a new home on that type of property also, but it has its challenges that are different from these types of things. So let's talk real quick about like infrastructure. So what's under the ground, right? So when you put your house on the ground, you're going to have to connect it to water, sewer, gas, those types of things. This, number 1, would be the easiest of all those if you're building a new home. So with that in mind, you're going to have a subdivision where the streets are going to be newer, the curbs are in, the sewer is going to be there, the water is going to be there, the gas is going to be there, the electricity is going to be there. And so basically when you have your home site, let me find my eraser here, okay, so I can have room to draw. So if you've got your home site, here's your street coming in, right? And this is your home site, this is another home site, this is another one. So the city sewer and water is actually going to be trenched along your home site in what they call the easement. All right, and so maybe the streets here go in this direction, whatever that direction, and now we've got other home sites across the street, right? So maybe that they put the sewer on this side of the street and the water on that side of the street. That's okay. We do a road bore, we trench for that. That's normal. But the infrastructure is there. In the back, you're probably going to have your utility service that's going to be run in the back of the lots. And so we're actually hooking, so if we put our house up here, here's our driveway, we're actually hooking to the utility box right here that's in the back. The gas is typically ran across the front of it also, so we're connecting our gas meter to that also. It's all right there. So in our kind of new construction contracts, we include 50 foot of excavating, or 50 foot of, not excavating, but 50 foot of service lines. And so we know that generally in most of the subdivisions that we're going to build in, we're going to have probably a distance no further than 50 foot from the street to get our service line for our water into the house, for the sewer, and to the electrical. And so we basically price our houses and our projects based on knowing that we're going to have no more than probably 50 feet to do that, and that's kind of the norm. So example number 2 would be land. All right, so let's say we found a piece of ground that's 5 acres or whatever. So now we've got this big tract out here. All right, we own this big piece of ground. It's great. We got a little barn back here. Right, we got our house up here. Well, now here's the road way out here, right? Keep in mind, this is a large piece of ground. So now let's do this. Let's say that we wanted to have some privacy. We put our house back here. Well, now we've got to get from here to here with all the infrastructure, if it's even there. So sometimes when you buy land, depending on how far it's out, you may not have gas, you may not have water, you may not have electricity in those locations. You may have it way down here, right, at Farmer Bob's place, or the neighbor that you're going to take cookies to once you move in, right? But he has it and it stops right here. So you may have to pay to have that infrastructure trenched all the way down here. And guess what? They're going to charge you by the foot, right? So, and then if you hit rock, you're going to have to excavate that, dig through that. It can get expensive quick. And so the piece of the ground is always going to be more valuable if you actually have utilities and services like sewer, water, gas, all that stuff to your property. It may be stubbed out right here across the street. That's better than having it down here at Farmer Bob's place, right? So keep that in mind if you're looking for a piece of ground. So then if your house is sit back here, you're going to have to go from, let's just say it's at this point, you're going to have to go from here all the way to the house with all those utilities to do that. So our 50 foot would, stop about here. So now you got to think about that. So we would need to understand that there's going to be an additional cost to have to trench those simple utility services you're going to need for the house. Some ways to get around that would be if you had natural gas. You could have a natural gas, propane tank out there that's connected to the house. Solar, I guess you could do solar if you wanted to. That's not exactly the most inexpensive way to go these days. I don't know that it's going to be good enough for the entire home. Maybe as a backup, I'm not sure. We don't do a lot of solar. But then with the sewers are expensive to put in. You may end up with a septic system, and so you can have your lateral lines out here to where you put in a septic system. So there's different rules and regs for doing that also, whether it's allowed or not, and whether the soil will allow that to happen also. So you have to do what's called a perk test, a percolation test, to see if you can actually put a septic system in. So keep that in mind when you're talking about land. And so now if you have an existing subdivision where the home, maybe there was a home there, but you got homes on either side. And let me talk about something here with the new home subdivision also. So if you've got your new home lots here, your home sites going here, and you've got your street, let's say you got them across the street also. This is existing, that's existing, that's existing, okay? So let's say you pick out, you want to build on this right here, there was a house, you bulldozed it, now you've got this. So you've got the benefits of being in an existing subdivision, the same benefits that you have here, they just may be older. So for example, if you're going to go to a subdivision that was built 30, 40 years ago, your city sewer and water lines are going to be older. And so like in KCMO, every winter we have water lines that burst because they're old. And so the material that they used back at that point in time is not as good as what they have now. And so that's really nothing that's going to affect you at your exact home, but it is something when you tie into it that you may have to take into consideration. One of the big things is that if you're going to build between two homes like this, especially if it's a smaller lot, you're going to have to deal with where do you put the dirt situation. And so that's where we get into some of the site costs that we can talk about in a whole nother video. But just think about if you're trying to excavate this big hole here, if you're on a subdivision where there's not a house here, there's not a house here, right, on these building lots, then you can excavate this, put the dirt over here, put the dirt over here until you're done and have room to move around. If you're trying to excavate a house between two houses, you're typically, depending on the size of your lot, going to have to remove that dirt off-site and then bring dirt back in when you're done because you just don't physically have anywhere to work. And you'll see that, like commercial construction, when they put a new tower downtown Kansas City, they literally have just the footprint to work in. They're not going to be able to put dirt in the street for a long period of time. If they're excavating for a new parking garage or a new basement, they have to literally remove it. So it's easy to do, but it costs a lot of money. And so having to run excavators, having to run dump trucks to get that stuff in and out, especially if you're downtown. If you're in an area like Mission Hills or something, there's really nowhere to take that dirt. And so now you're going to have to pay, you know, $150 to $175, $200 an hour for an excavator and a dump truck driver to drive that stuff all the way back out south or to the country somewhere, or where the landfill's at, to get rid of it. And so if you're in an existing subdivision, one of the benefits with that is that generally, if you're building more than one home as a builder or other builders, one builder may need the dirt that you need to get rid of, or you need the dirt that he needs to get rid of, or you have rock that needs to be dumped somewhere as fill. And so you can kind of help each other out and piggyback off that to lower the costs of the actual site costs that you could incur. And so you don't really have those options in an existing subdivision as you would in a new subdivision, because you're just the only guy in there building. So you're going to have to get rid of everything, bring stuff back in. No one's going to help you. To the contrary, they're probably not going to like the fact that you're building next to them, even though you're going to improve their value. It's just going to be disruptive, because these people may have lived here for 30 years and not had anybody next door, and now all of a sudden you've got all this construction noise and trucks everywhere, and it is what it is. I mean, so for that 6, 7, 8, 9 month to a year process or whatever, you may have to bring those neighbors extra cookies. I'm not sure, maybe when you're done. So anyway, these are just basically the 3 types of building home sites that we would see: new home subdivisions, raw land, existing subdivisions that are older. Some of the examples would be subdivisions that we build in Chapel Hill, Dayton Creek, 5 acres, 2 acres, 20 acres, whatever, or an existing subdivision like down in the inner city type of situation like that. And then keep in mind what your site cost could potentially be for infrastructure, you know, depending on what you decide to go on. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please put them below in the comments. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. Please like us on Facebook. Give us comments on there. We'd love to hear what you guys would like to learn and what you guys you know, would like me to talk about. This is just one small topic about home building, and I'm going to bring more of these in the future to kind of educate you as a buyer to understand how a builder selects some of these things, talks about these things, how we figure out what to do, where the cost comes in, how to avoid some costs, etc., etc. So please subscribe to our YouTube page, share it if you like, let us know how we can help. Thanks so much. Take care.